You're welcome from that short break. In the concluding part of our conversation, Mr. Nyam gives projections into the year 2019. If you were to do your own assessment right now, each point the expectation is that every assembly comes and helps to enrich the tradition, build the institution, you understand, so that it becomes as it should be and as is envisaged in the Constitution. How would you rate this assembly as in building that tradition?
Well, I think we are talking about the independence of the legislature, and I think in terms of that, this assembly has done very well. They've done very well. You recall that the struggle, to assert the independence of the National Assembly started with the very first legislature. Under then you have the Speaker Gavel, and then you had the late Chuba Okadibo, who was the Senate President. They started this struggle, to assert the independence of the legislature, and I think it's been swift. It's been smooth. From that time till now, each leadership that comes tries to build on it. You saw what happened in the last, in the 7th Assembly, especially in the House of Representatives, where Speaker Aminu Bello Waziri Tamboa, tried to build on it. And then the same thing is happening in the 8th Assembly. Both the House and the Senate, right from the way the leadership emerged, they've not relented. They've been consistent, ensuring that the independence of the legislature is maintained. And I think they've not hidden their desire to have the legislature independent of the other arms of government, especially the executive. That they have done very well. You have seen the fights between the Senate President and the executive, even up to going to the courts. He went through the courts and was able to come out unscathed. In the House of Representatives, of course, the Speaker had a little problem, with the executive, but then he too has been working around the clock to ensure that the independence of the legislature is not tampered with. I think in that area they've done very well.
Okay, you touched on an area a lot of people are always interested in when we speak about the legislature. That's the relationship between the legislature and the executive, especially as it has to do with the process or the governance of the country. This particular year under review, how would you say that relationship worked?
My experience in the legislature has shown that if the relationship between the lawmakers and members of the executive is a kind of how do you call it, bread and butter relationship, then it means that democracy will be in danger.
When you say bread and butter, what do you
mean? Where you pat my back and I also do same, give and take. Like in the past where we've had stories of Ghana must go moving around, but with the present administration from 2015 to date, that has been it's been very quiet. Nobody has experienced that, where an MDA, head of an MDA will move Ghana must go, to members of the legislature, trying to lobby either for a bill or for a particular favor. That has not been part of this legislature. So the not so cordial relationship between the two arms of government, I think, is good for our democracy. It's good for our democracy, and I don't think people should push too far. That no, this relationship has to be reviewed. I think the relationship we have now is good, because you will discover that whenever the National Assembly approves any request from Mr. President, it means such a request has gone through all the processes. For example, we talked about the $1 billion, which was approved from the excess crude account. You know, there was a heated debate.
Yes.
Members were allowed to express themselves. So it wasn't just that, okay, because the president wants money to fight insurgency, so he brought a request and let's just approve it. Members were allowed to express themselves, and they spoke. You know, people expressed themselves where they had issues. They raised them. But at the end of the day, it was approved. We also see in terms of loans, you know, bonds. There have been requests for bonds and loans that have been brought to the National Assembly. They also go through painstaking processes before they are approved. So it's not the usual relationship that, okay, such a thing is coming from Mr. President and we are members of his party, so he should be given an express approval. That has not been part of this National Assembly. We've
had this PIB that we've been trying to pass for a long time.
Yeah.
And one of the complaints that a lot of people have with the Electoral Act is that it came late in the day. What is it that you think can be done to get some of these crucial bills passed on time as an assembly comes in?
Yeah, you know, one of the major weaknesses of the parliament in Nigeria is that they do not start on time. You discover that most times the first year is spent on leadership tussle. You know, how the leaders emerge, and then they are trying to settle down. They are trying to renegotiate with the executive for them to be accepted with the parties and all that. So that has been a big problem. So, and that eats into their tenure. So by the time they start business proper, most times it's in their second year, or sometimes even in the third year. If you look at the present assembly, most of the key bills or key issues they handled were from the third year. You know, the very second year they were busy fighting. It's either they were fighting for leadership positions or they were fighting with the executive. So it was in the third year that most of the things started taking shape. For example, we talked about the Electoral Act amendment. This amendment came very late. It came very late. Supposing they started in the very first year, I believe this amendment would have gone through by now, because even Mr. President would have been exhausted with some of the excuses he has reached, you know, concerning the bill. But Assembly usually start late. So my advice is that as soon as they come in, 2-3 months is enough for them to settle down, to resolve all their leadership problems, and settle down to business, which the people have elected them to come and do. But when they start fighting, you know, fighting for personal gains, it also affects the job they have been elected to go and do in the National Assembly.
Do you also think this issue of the high turnover of lawmakers also contributes? Because some of them come in, they really do not understand how the process of lawmaking, or understand how it goes. Do you think that also is a factor? It's
also a very big factor. Very big factor affecting the performances of the two chambers of the National Assembly. I think in the last, in 2015, in the House of Representatives, just about 100 members were able to come back. So when you have that high turnover, you have a lot of new members coming in. Some of them have no legislative experience. They've not been to the State Assembly or any other place. So they are just coming to the National Assembly for the first time, and they start learning. You know, they go through the tutelage. So it takes them time. Perhaps they use the first year to learn. And then the second year, they start experimenting. The third year, they now get used to the process. And that's when they start working. And before you know, they are into election year. So the high turnover is also affecting the performance of the National Assembly. I think the lecturers should also look into that. You know, they should also look into that, because it's not just electing people to come to National Assembly, but they should come there and do what is expected of them. We should see the results.
I would like to have you just tell us as briefly as possible. We have the budget has just been brought. 2019 budget has just been brought. We have elections on the way. This is the last year for this assembly, or the last few months. How do you see these last few months going?
Well, the last few months will just be politicking, because, mind you, elections, the first set of elections is coming on February 16th, which is less than 2 months from today. Now, the National Assembly is resuming on the 16th of January, which will be exactly a month to the election. By the time they come back, they may do 1 or 2 weeks and go back. And of course, very few of them, since last year, very few have been attending sessions, you know, because they are busy in their constituencies, fighting on how to retain their seats. So nobody has time for lawmaking again or oversight. So basically, we may not experience much again, even the budget. And of course, from what I'm seeing, the budget may not be passed maybe till about late April or early May, because the last set of elections will be on 2nd of March. So business will actually resume in National Assembly towards the end of March. And then, mind you, we have Easter break. There's going to be Easter in April. So they also go on Easter break. So by the time they come back, definitely will be in May. So perhaps the 2019 budget may be signed a week before the handover.
That was a very interesting note to end that chat. And it makes one look forward to the days ahead as the 8th National Assembly gradually make their way out. Well, this is where we call it a day. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Lanre Lasese. Take care.